tonight, I can guarantee you, if I did this show on CNN or on Fox, I think I would get about 15 minutes into this show, and the network execs would have been on the phone with my show executives, and they would have been screaming for 45 minutes. Guarantee it. And then I would have got the lectures of my life. And here's why this show is not done on cable news. Because we're going to mention God. And then we're going to get really crazy, and we might even open up the Bible, because there's some really important things that I think are happening. And this week, we're going to take on a few things, and not all of them religious in nature, but we're going to do things that nobody else does. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about God in hour number 1, and I know that violates the unwritten separation of media and God that must be written down someplace, but I don't really care, because I remember when I was in Washington, D.C., and it was 1982, and I was on the air in Washington, D.C., and Howard Stern had just left. And he went up to, I think it was to go up to NBC in New York City. And I remember I said, pissed on the air, I'm pissed. And I got a full-page memo. I wish I could get that memo back. I threw it away, but I wish I had it today because it said so much about society. And it was a full-page memo, and it said, I don't know if you know who you're working for or where you are, but you're in the nation's capital. And we don't use that kind of language here. And I thought that was pretty amazing. And they were right. At that time, 1982, we didn't use that kind of language on radio. About 1996, when I was starting to search for God again, I found myself self-editing out things like God, or I went to church, because we don't say things like that on the radio anymore. And sometimes now in our culture, they make us uncomfortable. I did a show last week or 2 weeks ago that would have made me sweat profusely had I been on the network, because I would have known what my staff was going through. My staff probably lost 60 pounds just in sweat while I worked over at Fox and at CNN, because I don't care what people think, and I don't care what the rules are, if I believe it's important. I want you to know that I am a guy that a lot of people have a hard time listening to when it comes to God, because, I'm a guy who screwed up my whole life, and I don't care where you go to church. I really don't. That's not for me to decide. That's for you to decide. And when I grew up going to church, but only because our mother made us. She didn't go with us. We went by ourselves, me and my 3 sisters, and we would walk to church every Sunday, and we would go by ourselves, and that was strange. But it allowed me to have a personal relationship with God. And I think that's important, because that's the way God speaks to people. He talks to you about your life and me about my life. And that worked for a while, and then finally I fell away from the church and from going to church, and even almost my belief in God. I became angry and bitter and depressed, and I filled my life with money and stuff, and everything that they print about me now was actually true about 25 years ago. But that's what destroyed my life. That's why it's not true now, because those are the things that destroyed me. But what a blessing that destruction was, because I started to actually seek real answers. And I read everything from all sides. I read Darwin to Dobson. I question everything. I've told you before, because of something I read in a letter from Thomas Jefferson to his nephew, Peter Carr. Question with boldness even the very existence of God. For if there be a God, he must surely rather honest questioning over blindfolded fear. Well, I did that. And it took years and years and years. And I even was an atheist for a while. That didn't work for me. But I wasn't going to believe in a God that was just this magic God that I didn't know personally. And at times, that searching seemed futile. It seemed like there's no way. There's no way I was going to find any answers. I still feel that sometimes. I felt that this weekend. But I know why I was led down that long path. And it's because I poured through a mountain of information. And it's because of that I can stand here and tell you with absolute certitude that God lives, God cares, God is involved in our life. I know it. I told you on the radio today something happened this weekend that kind of relates to this show. And when I tell you in about 30 days what happened this weekend, and you just remember this show tonight, when I tell you what happened this weekend in about 30 days, it will prove what I just put up there. He's leaving us warnings, he's leaving us instructions, and most importantly, he is giving us hope. And we're going to need every last bit of it because I believe we are living in the times that the prophets spoke of. And I know that, one day to God is like 1,000 years, so I have no idea what time of the day it's going to be. It might be in morning to God, and this afternoon it happens. I don't know how long it takes to play out, but we're living in it. I can say that with absolute certitude. I can also tell you this. History repeats itself, and that's a blessing to us. History repeats itself in art, in fashion, in politics. What's happening in right now happened in the 1930s. Dictators. The patterns repeat over and over and over again. One of the books I challenged you to read this year is this one. It is In the Garden of Beasts. I can't even get my friends or families to read this because, they're numb to my suggestions at this point. And this, I just open it up to any page. Page 202, first word that jumps out, Gehring. So it's not a happy book, okay? And I've beaten the life out of my friends with the books, and they cry a lot. So they're not going to read it. And if you're not going to read it, that's fine. Let me suggest another book, because this one has a garden and a beast. It starts in a garden and ends in a beast. But warning, the kids around you might want to cover their eyes and ears, because this book is considered one of the most dangerous books and controversial books in history. It used to be taught in every school. Now it's not. These are not normal times. People think that we are fighting a political campaign, but we are not. This is not about the Obama administration or who's going to be our next president. This is about our survival and quite possibly the survival of our souls. There's a much, much bigger battle that goes on. And actually, this is called a challenge coin. This is my challenge coin. I give this occasionally to people. It's a military tradition. But I keep one in my pocket, and I've showed it to you before. I don't know if I've ever shown you the front of it. I've shown you the back of it, which is the buffalo. But here's the front of it. Do we have the challenge coin? Because there it is. It relates to Ephesians. And I want to come back to this, but let me show you what's in Ephesians real quick, because these are the times that we're living in. And it is, put on the full armor of God, that you may be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devils, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood. This is important for you to understand when you're reading the news this week. It's not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. I have no doubt that this is a warning for us right now. We are not battling for the next election. We're battling for the very soul of each of us and of our nation. Anyone who doubts that, take a good look at the news and the twisting and the distorting and the evil that comes from the hate crimes to the subtle attacks. Try this one on. This one is former faith advisor to the President of the United States, Barack Obama. His name is Sean Casey. He recently spoke at the Center for American Progress that's Soros funded. Here's what he had to say about civil religion. Listen.
There is also a negative underside to that history with respect to slavery, to manifest destiny, to war, to empires. So I frankly am glad American civil religion is dying.
This is crazy. I mean, people of faith basically are the cause of slavery and the wars and everything else. No, sir. No, sir. It is the government using religion. Religion has freed us here in America. But he's glad it's dying off. Now let's assume that he's right. What happens after this religion dies off? Listen.
But it does raise the practical question, what does bind us together in some way as a country? We need some substitute for that, and I don't think
we have it yet. So he's saying we need some substitute for religion, but they don't necessarily have any ideas yet. They're looking for something that will bind them together. Just a guess, maybe hope could bind us all together.